Well, hello everyone and welcome to Political Paradigm. I'm Terry Ikumi. My guest today is an activist who is also the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress, Omoyele Sowore. Welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank you very much for bringing me.
You see, I stumbled trying to merge activism and politics together. I'm sure you get that all the time.
I get that. That's why I asked people to call me a political activist.
Let me start this conversation by asking you this. How has it been for you transitioning from a treasonable charge over your head to running for office as president? Because when you did that in 2019, there was no charge.
Yeah.
But it's different now.
I think all over the world, the offense of treasonable felony or treason is always a political one. And it is reason that there hasn't been anybody successfully prosecuted for treason or treasonable felony in Nigeria since 1963. And that only person was Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And it was such a politically charged trial and conviction that they had to release him and bring him into the federal cabinet under the military in those days. So if you understand it as a political offense, you take it as it is.
There are those who believe that you were better off as an activist, a fighter for democracy. And there are some who now say that you venturing into politics has tainted your name, because it would seem that you are looking for more than anything political relevance than actually fighting for the people. How do you react to that?
No, I think it's contradictory to say that someone who fought for democracy had also consistently, over 3 decades, consistently is the operating word now, done the same thing that has promoted, enabled, and empowered people to continue to enjoy real democracy, is looking for relevance. I mean, what relevance am I looking for after 30 years? When at the age of 22, I was already a national figure in Nigeria as a student leader, and had delivered, among other people, not just me, including media as well, what we thought was a great idea to the country. So to not turn around and say I'm looking for relevance or that I'm tainted because I participated or I want to participate.
You know, they say you can't go through Nigerian politics without getting dirty.
I understand. It's the reason why I hate to be called a politician. Because it's as good as saying somebody is a dishonest character and I don't like it. But hey, I cannot decide how people regard me. But the point is that if I was the regular homemade politician that everybody is used to, I wouldn't be fighting so hard. I wouldn't be going to detention for calling for a revolution. Maybe I'll be going to detention for stealing money, which is what is usually what most politicians go to detention for. And now it has become a badge of honor, by the way, to be arrested for corruption. But I wasn't arrested for corruption. Even when they tried to taint me with a corruption charge, that I went to Dubai to collect money. When they discovered that I'd never been to Dubai before, they quietly withdrew the charge. So the point to make is that you cannot create an idea and that should flourish and you run away from it. It's just like planting a tree and you leave it in charge of people who never supply with water. One day you get there and the tree would have dried up or died. So that's the duty that we have, is that for too long we have left the most important jobs in this country to those who have no idea how to do them. As somebody said once, I cannot quote directly who said this, I can't remember the young guy who was speaking. He said, it is politicians who determine if your child is legitimately born or not. It's politicians who determine whether your name is acceptable or not. Because until politicians decide to sign off on your marriage, it's not legit. They decide where your children go to school, which roads you ride on, which planes you fly on. You cannot, therefore, leave the job of the most important thing that affects your life to practically morons in your country.
So let me take you up on something that's
Yes.
a concern with regards to the office you are seeking, the office of the president, the highest office in the land. Some would question your level of exposure to governance or experience for something like this,
Yes.
and how aware you are of the happenings in the country beyond the discomfort you feel towards regular politicians. I ask this also because of the statement credited to Alhaji Atiku Abubakar when he said that, understandably, you would want to speak against him. But how well do you know this country when you've spent a great chunk of your life outside it?
What Atiku said was, and I recall vividly, it was that I have been running for elections, and each time the elections are over, I run away. I don't come around. Turns out that he didn't even know who he was referring. Maybe he was talking about another person. In that case, he was talking about Atiku. Because Atiku is the only politician I know who disappears after elections. And I'm not saying this just for the sake of saying it. I know this to be true. Because in 1992, when I was 21 years old, Atiku ran as the presidential aspirant of the SDP, the Social Democratic Party, against MKO Abiola, Chief MKO Abiola at that time. He lost. Disappeared. We didn't see him until 1999. I didn't hear of him until 1999 when I was leaving the country. In every election cycle, consistently, after the election, he disappears. And this last election, 2019, after he lost, he disappeared to Dubai. He just showed up again in this election cycle. Contrary to his claim, I only ran once. That was 2019. I have not left since then. I was arrested shortly after that and restricted to Abuja and decided to run again. So where did you get the impression that I don't know what is going on? Before becoming a political partisan person, was actively involved in anything that has happened in this country in the last 3 decades. I've been involved. I was involved in the struggle against military rule, the delivery of democracy. I was involved in the fight against third term when Obasanjo wanted to convert Nigeria to Zimbabwe. I was involved. I was involved in one of the most contentious periods of transition in this country, which was when the president at that time was dead, brain dead, Yar'Adua, and there was need for transfer of power to someone from the Niger Delta region, which has never happened in Nigeria. I was a key character in exposing all of what was going on, including the plan by the military at that time to overthrow Jonathan, which they have now confessed to, which we wrote about when I was running Sahara Reporters. I was involved in a period of documenting a period of the transition from one political party to the other. So there's nothing politically happening that I've not been involved in. But it turns out that this is the first time I'm involved in partisan politicking. Otherwise, I think it will be all right,
But
and
that
honest to claim that, to say that someone like me is a repository of the happenings within the political scene.
But that doesn't answer whether or not
No, I was
you
going
have
to that.
the exposure
Yes.
experience.
So there are 2-part questions. The exposure part is what they have always used to deceive people in Nigeria. You see, when people are looking for leadership, for the position of president, the first thing they look for is character, exposure. People have vision, people who have mission, who are driven, because countries everywhere in the world don't just go and look for an experienced person if their experience had not led to prosperity, progress, and peace in the past. So to claim that somebody doesn't have experience because he was not an experienced thief or an experienced murderer or an experienced manipulator doesn't sound like something that makes sense in the context of electoral politics of this nature, especially for the presidency. Look at Nelson Mandela. He came directly from prison, 27 years in prison. Which experience did he really have? Which local government did he govern? Which state did he govern? He became South Africa's first president after the collapse of apartheid. I can give you countless of examples all over the world where people look up to leaders, elect leaders based on, their political uh, relevance, their political understanding of their issues, and their ability to solve those problems. In the case of Nigeria, what do you have with experienced people? I'll give you the example of President Buhari. He should have been the most experienced human being living on earth as far as Nigeria is concerned today. He was governor of Gongola State. I think that's 3 states at the time. He was a commissioner for petroleum resources, what you call minister now. He managed the biggest slush fund in the history of Nigeria, the PDF. I think Petroleum Development Fund that Abacha created. And he was head of state before, and then became president again. Look at what his experience is doing to your country. What about President Olusegun Obasanjo, former head of state, international statesman? You know, he was almost becoming the UN Secretary General at a point. I know most Nigerians don't know these things. Became president of Nigeria. Look at what he gave you. So why are we using, corrupted experience as a basis for leadership when everywhere in the world, even constitutionally, nobody is said to become president because he was a thieving governor before or because he had occupied positions? People look for integrity, they look for character, they look for vision-driven leaders. But here, we are manipulated to believe that the person who was meanest to us in a state is going to be the best president because we only can think inversely that bad politicians are good for us.
While it's almost understandable when you say that ideas should be the basis and expectations, vision should be what we look forward to, the politics in Nigeria is still money-driven. I'd like to think that in 2019 you had a challenge with money in terms of how you would fund your campaign, because I recall that you had traveled to different countries to raise funds. So I ask you this question. With regard to your 2019 election, was it truly a challenge for you? And how are you going about it differently in 2020, ahead of 2023? Or do you not believe that it will be a concern?
What I found out in 2019 was everybody who I met when I was running for president said money will be a challenge. And it turns out that money wasn't the biggest challenge that we had. It was the electoral process that was the biggest challenge, because the rigging of elections in Nigeria, with due respect to how they carried out the leads, they don't start from election date alone. You will find out that one of the things that happened to me consistently during the 2019 election was the fact that they wouldn't even allow me to participate in presidential debates. They cut me out from it, even though their own internal polling revealed that in several markets, I was one of the second favored person, in the country. But when money was the issue, we went innovatively raising money in ways that has never been done before in Nigeria, crowdfunding. And I was able to travel around the world. But it wasn't the travel alone that brought the money. It was just that faith, that people saw that this young person, or youthful person, not particularly young anymore, could carry out all these issues because the ideas were freely flowing, and they could see through that. That led us to, I raised over 200 million, up close to 200 million naira in 2019. But that's a drop in the bucket compared to our competitors, because they had private jets, they had billions to themselves, and some of them came from locally. All these, big business people were, jostling ahead of themselves to give them money. But I found it very interesting that people listened to us more. They were more interested in what we had to say than they did the big men. And that is why they always resorted to the last card that they have, which is to bribe voters, to bring in police, security agencies, and also compromise INEC, including violence. So this, if they could win on merit, they wouldn't have done that. They didn't need to go that far. So it's not always money. People are out there yearning for ideas, and you could see that even in this political season. All the young people who are out there saying they want change, and in some cases, they use their own resources. But I won't be telling the whole truth if I tell you that money is not a challenge. There's nowhere in the world where money is not a challenge. But I think that I've been, a pioneer in that area of innovatively raising money, and I'm going to do that again this time around.
Well, in terms of making amends with regard to how the elections turned out in 2019, even though you had said that the 30,000 votes which you got were allocated
Yes.
to you, there are concerns as to what approaches you would take going into 2023, which would be different from 2019 with regard to how you would prepare for the elections in 2023.
Well, I'm preparing for the elections in a very open and transparent manner, and that's what I'm doing now. And we hope that the electoral umpire, INEC, will do the same. But if they don't, we still owe the populace a duty to raise hell. And some of us who are participating in this election, and some others who may not even be aware that in participating in election, sometimes one of the things you're doing is throwing up the contradictions in the system that would let people have faith in your person and in their country, and may not lead to having faith in the system that have compromised their choices. And when people know this, they may not take it kindly. And it could lead to the other alternatives that we may not be discussing now.
Absolutely. So I think it's interesting that I did not hear you mention political structure improvement. Or would you? Is it okay to say? Is it okay to say that the political structure that most politicians speak about is irrelevant?
I've spoken about it extensively, and everybody is now talking about. Most people are talking about that. The political structures you see with the big legacy parties are transactional structures. They're just for transactions.
But then it would seem that it grows the party. So I'd like to ask you,
it doesn't grow the party.
What level of growth did the AAC experience in the past 3 years, which could serve as structure without money, if you put it that way?
So what we're looking at is organic growth that is driven by ideals as opposed to money. That's why I said the other money-driven growth are transactional in nature. And that is that when people are desirous of real revolutionary change, they will become the structure overnight, because this is their expectation, and they go all out to reinforce and build those structures organically. And I think we have to admit that is happening at this time. How long we can sustain it is what we should continue to debate from time to time. But there is organic structures right now popping up everywhere.
For the AAC?
For AAC, yes. You see, let me tell you, any structure that can withstand the bullets cannot be afraid of the ballot.
Well, speaking of organic structure, if I take you back to 2019, the build-up to the elections, you were an alternative. I think your manner, the way you conducted yourself towards elections and how exposed you seemed at the time, sort of put the youths on your side. But let me ask you, going into these elections in 2023, do you feel that you're falling out of favor with the youths?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all.
So I ask this question because of the NSAS protests. A lot of the things that we see now, based on the people I've spoken with, seems to be an offshoot from the NSAS protest. Even you have alluded to that. Mm-hmm. But during the NSAS protests, you were sort of rejected by the people when you appeared at one of the protests, and they declined to allow you speak even on their behalf.
No, that's not true.
You don't see that you were not chased away from the protest?
Let me explain to you that I was the first person to start NSAS in Abuja. I was the first person to take young people to the police headquarters, and the evidence is there abundantly.
You're saying you led the NSAS protest in Abuja?
In Abuja, to the first ever NSAS protest in Abuja, I led it to the police
Not the first ever, I'm saying.
Yes.
The NSAS protest we witnessed in 2020.
Yes. No, I'm telling you.
Did you lead the NSAS protest in 2020?
See, I'm explaining to you that you can do your research on Twitter. And subsequently, what happened? I was the first person to call on people that, look, do you want us to hit the streets with regards to NSAS? let's make it happen. And subsequently, this way led the NSAS, and I can give you names that I went with: Deji Adeyanju, Aisha Yusufu. I was the one who called on them. I was the one who called on Faz through his dad, and then we eventually spoke, and they did their own in Lagos, and NSAS grew from there. One thing you should understand about NSAS was that when it was evolving, everybody said they don't want it to be led by anybody. It was a leaderless movement, which was itself a mistake, all right? Because what then happened was that the government was trying to fix on NSAS its leaders, people they could talk to. So, and at that time, it started getting political as well, because it was the same thing in 2012 when we had occupied Nigeria. It was politicized. After a while, political parties started hiding under, the movement, occupied Nigeria. It was a big movement at that time. Same thing, NSAS. So when I went to the National Assembly, some guys came and said, "Oh, you're trying to hijack the NSAS movement." And they said, "Well, we don't want it to be revolution now." I said, "You're wrong." They were actually attacking me based on my shirt, which said, and I stood my ground. I said, if you tell people what to wear to a protest, it then means that you don't understand what protests are about. After a while, they went away. Some of them came back and apologized to me. I have this on tape. So, but of course, as it was a politically charged period, government was trying to quell it. And they didn't want people they thought were hard-headed individuals to lead it. They saw me as one. This was a time, by the way, that they were following me around like flies, security agencies. I don't know even if they are the ones who did it, but I don't want to ascribe it to security agencies. So I stood my ground, and I only left after the protest was coming to an end on that day. But I have tapes, because it was live, where they came back and apologized to me. Oh, they thought, these are the things that
we would love to see those
But the
tapes.
campaign against revolution now during NSAS was very strong. And that's why I'm saying what you're seeing now are some of the political outcome
Campaign
of NSAS.
against revolution now.
Yes.
By who?
I think it was some of the political parties in government.
Well, then
They were saying to us that we couldn't wear our clothes, we couldn't make it in.
No, absolutely. I had drawn your attention
Yeah.
to your time as an activist
Yeah.
and then being in politics, and then the concerns from the youths at the time who sort of, had tilted in your direction. But during the NSAS protests, somebody like you, who had found favor with the youths before the elections, was denied.
No, I wasn't. That's what I'm saying. I was not at any time. I continued even after the one incident you mentioned. I have tapes. It's not like I'm just making this up. And when it was going to the end, even after they shot people at Lagos, I was the one who led the youths to go and put graffiti at the airport. And then the next day we put a graffiti at the police headquarters, and we put a graffiti at the National Assembly. All these things are things that you should be aware of, so that we don't make a bogey out of something that is false.
No, what the questions I'm asking are to find out whether you still see yourself as favored by the youths. Do you think that the youths still look to you as an alternative going into the elections?
I have no doubt.
Especially the youths who were largely part of the NSAS protest.
So that's what you should understand. The point I'm making is that a lot of people who were involved in NSAS were involved for different reasons. You understand? Some of them, as we have today, used it to grow their political clout. And then when it came to politics, they pitched their tent. But it's their right. We cannot discountenance that. I understand that. But the point I'm making is that followership is still there. For 3 years, we didn't have control of our political party. It was hijacked. For 3 years, I was restricted to Abuja. For 3 years, the security agencies were following me all over the place. For 3 years, they were following me with knife and dagger in this Abuja. Non-state actors. For 3 years, attempts were made to frame me with other crimes. I've mentioned it.
It would seem that...
The only person that was most repressed since 2019 is myself. But to even, have found my way out of that adversity and become a presidential candidate in it. It's something that should be of interest to you guys.
You
I
know,
went through the hell that nobody has ever probably been through in a while. Probably you can count the likes of Nnamdi Kanu as having gone through my kind of adversity in the state, in the hands of the state and non-state actors. My accounts were frozen. The organization that I founded, Sowore Reporters, they had policemen standing in front of the office of where the suspected were operating for a whole year.
it would seem that
yes.
while you say that from that NSAS protest, which you say you sort of led, that you still you still have the youths on your side, it would seem that they have turned in the direction of Peter Obi. In fact, some say
look, I know
that
that's
he's a
where
beneficiary of the NSAS protest.
So that's exactly the point. So the question you should ask yourself is, did Peter Obi participate in NSAS? What's your answer to that?
It would seem that the people don't care.
Exactly.
They've seen an alternative.
Yes. So if NSAS was meant to be a political movement against oppression, and the person that they pitched their tent with is Peter Obi, according to you, which we challenge, that's not true, then there's something wrong with that. It then means that there was a clear political motive by some people during NSAS to turn this in direction of people who were even against or never participated. People have always been silent about repression. But I'm not here with a sense of entitlement. I'm not a Milocom. I am doing my political work. I'm doing what I've always believed in. I'm very focused on that. And I'm saying, contrary to what you believe or you're putting out there, that the youths, not all the young people who participated in NSAS are following Peter Obi. No. They may make it sound like that because in every political system, there is always plots and plots. For instance, it could have been that they looked at it and said, look, if we don't get this youth energy in direction of someone who is not one of them or who is soft, they are going to come after us. And this might be the reason why the likes of Obasanjo, Babangida, and the others who are lined up behind Peter Obi are doing it. It might be money. I'm not accusing anybody. But I'm saying that how is it logical that such a hot political movement would find accommodation with someone who never in his life cared about the rights of the youth? In fact, when NSAS panels were set up in Anambra State, Peter Obi was summoned to come and defend why he was using SARS against young people in the East. He had to get a big lawyer, a senior advocate of Nigeria, to represent him at the panel to say, please, you can invite me. So, does it make sense now that there might have been other reasons behind the transitions we are talking about? But I insist that nobody should make these brazen statements or mistake that all the young people in Nigeria are following a particular kind, or everybody who participated in NSAS.
There definitely cannot be everyone.
Yes, because I participated in NSAS.
But even you have talked about some organic movements that you have seen.
Yes.
You say some are tilted in your direction as well, just as some are tilted in his direction. So it leads to the question of your concerns ahead of the 2023 election with regards to the NSAS protests and what impact it will have on the outcome of the specifically presidential election next year.
Well, if the impact of NSAS produces one of the oppressors, right, then we haven't learned our lessons. But again, I do not want the conversation to be about entitlement. It should be about ideas. And that's why I'm out there selling the ideas. Is the reason why I've been in Lagos, done about 15 interviews. That don't make you win elections. And come back to Abuja and elections, the election campaigns are going to start. And Nigerians will be exposed to these ideas once again, because the ideas that prevail at the time you're talking about are unimpeachable. About security, about power, energy, and anybody that don't have these ideas will suddenly fall apart. And that's what we're going to see. But I don't want to make political choices for people during any electoral period. In fact, we haven't been that politically savvy in this country to have allowed our political choices to dictate our aspirations. So that's what we're here to correct. And we might be making the same mistake again.
Let me take you to the peace accord,
Yes.
which you as a presidential candidate is expected to sign in a couple of days. I'd like to believe you will sign.
I will be there to sign, but I have preferred a justice accord.
Can you explain that?
Yes, in that it would have been to have INEC, security agencies, and those who are involved peripherally and directly in the elections to sign a contract with the Nigerian people to deliver free and fair election and have all the presidential candidates sign it. I think the peace accord thing is a symbolism that's carried too far. It has become a symbolic political, it's very trivial political festival. Every election cycle, people come together and they come and sign a peace accord. And the election at the end will not deliver peace or justice. So of what value is it? So what it tells us is that, well, if you commit to this process, your campaign will not engage in violence. You know, you won't engage in things that are untoward. But the people, the major people who get the media attention at this peace accord are exactly directly opposite of peace and progress for the country. And we know them. They will leave that place, organize election rigging, leave that place, bribe INEC, leave that place, bribe police, army. So what's the use of Yan talks? What's the use of peace accord?
Yet you will sign.
Yeah, like I was invited and I will be there. It's not compulsory to sign because I didn't sign it last time.
But
because
why
they
didn't you
invite
sign
me.
last year?
I
Oh,
wasn't
but you.
No, they invited.
Have
they
you been
invited,
invited? No.
Yes, I have an invitation.
So will you sign?
They invited us last year and divided into two categories. The people they said were the top political front runners, and the rest of us. And I didn't see myself as the rest of them, so I didn't go.
In what capacity have you been invited, or where have you been categorized now?
There's no category this time. If
So
I walk into that place and they say, you go wait, I walk out. If they try the same thing, as far as I'm concerned, all the presidential candidates are equal. And any one of us are in this race to win.
So if that equality is in place, you will sign that peace accord?
Yes. You know, I will participate in the symbolism because the public needs to know.
Yet you don't think it will have any impact in 2023?
Look, when we do these things, we use them to speak to our convictions. You understand? And I've explained it to you. In fact, this is the first time anybody is asking me about the peace accord. You know, and the fact that they are signing peace accord shows that Nigeria is at war. Elections had been declared wartime activities. Otherwise, why are we signing peace accords?
Let's talk a little about governance now. One of the things I'm aware, as it concerns you, is that you're really concerned about the state of affairs of the country and high cost of governance. So should you become president while we await your manifesto to see if it's...
I have a manifesto now. I have a website.
The elections...
Probably the only presidential candidate with one.
By law, we can have that conversation in detail after from the 28th of September. But in cutting down the cost of governance, how do you think that you would go about it?
So one of the ways I'll go about it immediately is to deploy technology. And technology means that those simple things that you find in offices, even now in Nigeria, like using fingerprints to get into government public buildings, ensuring that you completely digitize or digitalize your payroll system, procurement systems, ensuring that you are not waiting for years after the deployment of IPs, for instance, to find out you have 54,000 ghost workers in the federal civil service or in the police, is what I'll do immediately. I will merge ministries that have no value with those that they have relative relevance. I would also ensure that there is no minister of state in any ministry, because why? why do we need a minister and a minister of state? I know some of them are ways of paying off politicians and giving them redundant roles. I will ensure that the EFCC and the ICPC, for example, is merged together. We have no reason to duplicate. I'm just using that as an example. But ultimately, the way to cut down the cost of governance is to look at those bogies that we call democratic institutions in our system. For instance, I want to change the constitution. One of the things we should target in changing the constitution of Nigeria, creating a new one, is to get rid of bicameral legislative system. We do not need a Senate and a House of Rep doing nothing. These are just waste of money. And that kind of funding that goes to them can be invested in education, in infrastructure, and all those areas where we need immediate investment. And I talk about this frequently, and it's now become something that is frequently talked about. South Korea is doing well. They don't have a bicameral legislative system. Even Senegal, some few years ago, got rid of their own. Our own is like the retirement home of former governors. They would have stolen in their state, stolen, and then they now come to the Senate. Some of them will be in the Senate while they're undergoing trial for corruption. And the moment you are in the Senate, you have some kind of, unspoken cover, legal cover. They have a way of influencing, judges, because they are the ones who have to, approve of some of the judges. They have power over the police. They can call anybody up and say, hey, I want to interfere in these cases. So I'll get rid of the bicameral legislative system and several other places where there's wastage of money. I travel around Abuja and I see federal agencies that you and I don't even know exist. And people are there. Some of them don't even come to work. Some come to work at 9 a.m., they leave at 10, but they get paid for work that they don't do. So you have to cut all that cost. And of course, the biggest cost to the biggest cost to cut is the loopholes that are all over the place and the corruption in the system. Corruption takes away most of our resources. There's no doubt about it. Almost 40% to 50% of our annual budgetary system goes into waste, mismanagement, and corruption. So I know that because of Buhari, people don't want to hear that you're coming to use fighting corruption as a basis for governance anymore. But it's still a problem, and it must be tackled very seriously.
Let's talk about the issue of subsidy now, which has become a national, some will call it embarrassment. Now, you're the national publicity secretary of your party, Ade Olorunfemi, reacting to the CNN interview which Peter Obi granted recently. He talked about the subsidy removal and said that Labour should dissociate itself from Peter Obi because the NLC, based on principle, should recall that millions of Nigerians rose up against the Goodluck Jonathan regime on this subsidy issue with a fear of the hike in petrol and indeed the cost of living. I'd like to believe that that's your position because you've also spoken on the issue of fuel subsidy and the need and that you wouldn't remove it, instead you would work on the refineries.
Yes.
But then would it not be that Labour has indeed seen a candidate who could take up the subsidy and, properly utilize the funds in terms of infrastructure development?
I think if you watched a video clip I gave at a Labour Commission meeting in Abuja, where at that time Peter Obi had not joined the Labour Party, where I referred to the Labour Party as an orphanage home for internally displaced politicians, IDPs as we call them. And the Labour Party has always lent its platform to anybody that wants to come and contest elections. In fact, in 2019, they endorsed Buhari. But having said that, even Peter Obi himself did say that there is no subsidy, that is a criminal enterprise. That means that it is not the people that are subsidized. It's the criminal gangs in the petroleum sector that are being subsidized. So why would you punish the people for what the criminals are doing? That's the point. And we believe, and I've stated it, that our refineries can work. And when you make them work, and you take out these criminal gangs he's talking about, including what the Comptroller General of the Customs said last week, that the NNPC is lying. He accused them of falsehood and falsification of figures when they claim that there are 60 million liters of oil being imported and consumed in Nigeria on a daily basis. The NNPC has not denied it. They only said we are going to investigate. So these are criminal gangs that are just taking Nigerians or Nigeria's resources for a ride. Getting rid of subsidy, which is about the only little thing that our people are enjoying from their God-given resources, right, is not something that is fair to the people. It is getting rid of the criminals that everybody should be talking about. And when you get rid of the criminals, you realize that subsidy is nothing. The subsidy that the people are getting is nothing. I did a research 3 days ago and discovered that everywhere in the world during hard times, people are subsidized. The government will subsidize the people. I was trapped in Nigeria. I've been trapped in Nigeria now for 3 years. When COVID pandemic hit, the US government was asking me to apply for COVID funds. And 3 times they attempted to pay me money. But I wasn't there to pick the money. I was outside the country. I have a student loan. They paused the repayment of the student loan and its interest for almost 2 years. Now they are thinking about canceling even the student loans completely in the US. So this is how people are being subsidized. But if all of that money that's going to student loans is hijacked by Dapo Abiodun's assistant, he's one of the people who stole COVID money, or Hush Puppy, what did the US do? They went after Hush Puppy. They went after the guy. How much did he steal from the subsidy from COVID? $600,000, right? But they ensured that they went after him. That's what Nigeria should do to people who are engaging, the criminals that are engaging in subsidy scam. You go after them. You don't use that as a basis for canceling what belongs to everybody. So I also know that there are daily allocations that are supposed to be meant for our refineries. They are not working, but we sell them, and somebody pockets them. The refineries have staff that are being paid till today, even though they're not working. So if the refineries have staff, get the refineries to work so that the staff can explain why we are paying them. That's the way governments operate. Government don't go out there to wish hunt the people. And you discover at the end of the day, when the refineries start working, you deal with the criminal gangs the way you should, that we are not subsidizing anymore. In fact, we could be selling gasoline, which is what they call petrol here, to neighboring countries. If I'm president of Nigeria and you are smuggling fuel, what I'll just do is ask NNPC to build petrol stations around the border. I'll be selling to them at prices higher than what you get inside of Nigeria. So there won't be need for smuggling anymore.
Let's talk about the issue of your personal experience now. You have repeatedly claimed to be a victim of security abuse by security agencies.
Yes, I have scars to show for it.
Should you become president, to ensure that no other Nigerian goes through that, what sort of reforms would you bring?
Plenty of it. And I understand how the security agents work in Nigeria. They are hired mostly by VVIPs to protect them, also victimized citizens. I will make sure that all the security agencies go back to their normal constitutional or traditional or conventional duties. For instance, there is no basis for the army to be controlling traffic in our cities. The police has completely retreated from its job of protecting citizens. And one of the examples is what we saw yesterday, where a female police officer was brutalized by the person she was protecting simply because she refused to be doing household chores. The police has become a force for, I call them mega. They're protecting empty houses. They are going to parties to help serve food to people. They clean, they are drivers. There's nothing abusive in this way that they don't use police for, and these are the VVIPs. So you remove all of that. There's no reason for a governor to have 200 policemen and another 50 DSS men, Navy where they have connection, or the Army. No reason. The governor of the state where I live in the U.S., New Jersey, has 2 police officers. At the time, the governor had an accident and broke his leg. And they had to sack the police officers or investigate them because they said the governor was not supposed to sit in front of the car. But they said they told him and he wouldn't listen. Only 2 of them. But if he has to do like official duties that requires more police or security, they will contact the policemen in that neighborhood to protect him. That is not to say that we should leave our public officials unprotected, but we have no business carrying bags for madame, opening gates, opening the door of vehicles. Sometimes you've seen that skit. It wasn't a skit, it was real, where El-Rufai was in a car. The person who is supposed to open his door is in front. Somebody has to open the door for him, and then he'll come and open it. It's all a joke. These guys make governance look like something that is just a joke, as if they are performing skits. So, to go back to your question, we make sure that these reforms are immediate. And we also do not have to forget that they haven't been training them for a long time, because the process of hiring and recruiting these officers are be based on nepotism and not competence. We have to return to all of that and make sure that when it comes to human rights, we don't play with it. People who abuse citizens have to be dealt with immediately. And the best way to do it is to put in place in every police unit a human rights officer, trained from that process all the way from the police college. There should be someone... Have
you seen the state of the police college?
Well, the one that's a university. I don't want to talk about the police barracks and they are nothing to write. It's also part of what we should fix. I personally don't believe that we should have police barracks. We should have a housing system for police officers that allow them to own their own homes, so that when they have accidents or they die or they retire, they are not reluctant to leave. We shouldn't be having police barracks. And I think if policemen or soldiers live with civilians, they will gain some level of respect for them. That division between where they live and where the civilians or the people they are protecting live is also part of why they treat them like, oh, these are bloody civilians. But if you have to be subjected to rent, housing, the same way civilians are subjected to it, you will understand why they can't come and ask you to go and eject somebody without a law court order, because you also can become a victim of that. So there's a need to civilize and civilianize our security agencies as well.
Just before we go, we're almost out of time now, but I recall that you had talked about how you went about your campaigns in 2019. You said you had traveled to, I think, 35 states.
35 states, yes.
And you did all that by road.
Mostly by road. I flew to some places.
You flew to some places,
They were the airports. I also traveled by water.
Considering the state of the country, security state of the country, do you believe that you'd be able to embark on the same routes by road now?
Well, what has also happened to us in campaigning is that a new dimension has come to it, technology. Now you can address a rally completely virtually, so you don't have to go to everywhere. I would admit to you that some of the places we went to in Zamfara and Katsina, you can't try them today. They have been completely taken over, even parts of Sokoto, by bandits. And one thing that happened in 2019 was that we applied for police protection. We never got it. We're going to apply this time around because it's our right to be protected like every presidential candidate. But will I still travel? Definitely. Would I do that as extensively as I did last time? I don't think time is on our side to do that. And I don't think we should not use technology to bridge some of those things. Most people now listen to you on Facebook the same way they would have if you were doing a public rally. And rallies somehow have also become tainted, by, giving handouts to people. I had an experience in Akwa Ibom in 2019. I came into town, we were planning a rally, and we ran into a group of persons. They said, "What are you guys looking for?" We said, "Well, we want to do a rally." I said, "How many people do you want at your rally?" I said, "Yeah, bring everybody out." So, go bring 10 million. I said, "What?" They said, well, this is what we do for a living here. You know, it took us close to the stadium. We saw people hanging around and said, well, these are the people that were with PDP yesterday. We have them to stay for APC's rally tomorrow. And if you pay us, we ask them to stay for your rally so that you can have a sizable crowd. So I looked at it and said, oh, is this how you guys organize rallies? It's no longer organic because it's one of the things that politicians have done very well in this country is that they have devalued the integrity of our people. That, you know, people are so cheap these days and life has become cheap and meaningless. So anytime you see a rally, you know, you start to have doubts because the worst politicians we get the most amount of people following them at rallies. And they would have paid for it. Some of the people who go to these rallies don't even know the name of the political parties that they went to the rally for. But I think the most important thing to do this time that I will focus a lot on is GOTV, get out to vote. Because if more people vote, regardless of whether they attend rallies or not, that would be the most important thing.
Well, our time's almost up, but I would always ask this question to every political and presidential candidate, or in fact, any candidate I talk to, and that would have to be the electoral umpire, your confidence in the electoral umpire going into the elections and your expectations.
I do not, and I'm saying it straight to your camera here, I do not believe that INEC as is presently composed is capable of delivering free and fair elections. But we'll stay on their case. Despite of the electoral engagement that we're going to have, that we cannot continue to have an INEC in which the leadership of INEC are card-carrying members of certain political parties, depending on who is president. But the long-term solution to that is to not allow presidents to appoint INEC chairman. There should be a thorough process that is devoid of political influence in that regard. How do we do it? If you ask me right now, I don't think I have immediate answers for you. But I think it's the right thing to do, not to allow presidents to determine who are electoral commissioners and INEC chairmen.
Mr. Omoyele Sowore, thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing me to me.
Mr. Omoyele Sowore is the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress, AAC. And that's all the time we have for Political Paradigm today. Remember to catch this episode and others on YouTube. Simply search Political Paradigm or go to channelstv.com. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.